Hello and welcome to the Petersen Automotive Museum and the world-famous vault. My name is Andy, I'm one of the tour guides here. And today it's my privilege to take you through our new reimagined layout of the vault, where we now have over 300 cars, we've added a gallery in the back, and this allows us a more chronological look from old times to new. Please, come with me. The first part of the vault we have is the brass era. And this is between 1900 and 1915 officially, but we go to the first generation, the mid-20s. And, well, there were over 100 car companies that are companies that incorporated as car makers. Many of them didn't make it. One of them, the 1914 Petite Speciale, was an attempt by GM Kennedy right here in Los Angeles, a rare Los Angeles-based car, to make a car for the ladies. You notice the higher top for the women and their beautiful hats, the beveled glass in the back, and color. Yeah, back then, white. If you advertised a car as white, that was boldly colorful. You can have a discussion later on if white is actually a color. But anyways, it's also missing one key element, the crank, because women didn't want a crank back then. So this had an electric starter, and it was a prototype. They only made 5 of these. They spent $200,000, and by the time it was kind of ready to go, they couldn't get funding, and men had come back from World War I and they got back in their cars. They were doing the driving. Unless you had an electric car, then women could drive, but no woman was going to be cranking. There were also car companies that did make it to production, like the Demote. We have a 1910 over there with a lower riding height and plush seats. That's a Detroit-based car. They wanted to sound French to give you that aristocratic feel. That was only $550. Compare that with a Model T of the time of $825. And that brings us to the car that put America on wheels. This is a 1918 Model T. So the Demote didn't last very long because it would put out of business, as many car companies were, by Ford. And Henry Ford's greatest accomplishment is not inventing the car, but it's convincing people he invented the car. Many people come to the vault every day and they assume that story is true. But another thing he did not do is invent the assembly line. That actually was done in the early days by Oldsmobile, the first mass-produced American brand. But he revolutionized it by creating the, at least for cars, the moving assembly line, which he got, I believe, from the stockyards. And so he took his $825 car, and by making the timeline of production go from 14 hours down to 90 minutes, he also cut the price because it was faster and he was selling more. From $825, in the end, you could get a stripped down, no frills, no fuss Model T by 1927 at $295. So this was a 20 horsepower car. In fact, they were still trying to figure out how they worked. It was a reliable car, and Ford had vertical integration as its advantage. So all the parts were there as part of Ford. So if anything broke, you get it fixed. They have it. They don't have to ship out to or call out to Buffalo and have it shipped by train. The great phrase that you may have already heard is you could have this in any color you wanted as long as it was black. And that was because they were selling so many that Ford didn't want his cars just standing in the factory floor. It had to get out to the showrooms and out to the buyers. And they said that black was the fastest drying color. That may be true. Also, I'm told Ford had a share of a paint company, so we could use that. But he did not offer a self-starter. He kept you cranking until 1919. Then you could get it as an option. In 1915, nearly as many Fords sold as all the other car makers combined. So there needed to be competition on the lower end brands, and this was a reliable car at a lower end, at a lower price. So Billy Durant figured out that if he could create a car that modeled itself after the Model T instead of a luxury brand like all the other car makers, he would be able to compete. And that is exactly what the Chevy 490 is. Created with his old Buick racer, Louis Chevrolet, and of course Billy Durant had originally owned Buick. And this is similar, you'll notice, to the Model T, except it has some advantages. The self-starter. There's no crank. Self-starter comes standard. The speedometer down here measuring revolutions on the wheel comes standard. Electric horn standard. Headlight dimmer standard. And it was sold at $540, which was just more than the price point of the 490. Yes, Billy Durant was trolling Henry Ford and Ford, saying, I've got your car right here. Now, Ford did lower it to $440. So it was a $100 difference, but you're getting more. And this is just Billy Durant basically reeling in Ford. They were outsold 5-1 at first, then 2-1, and then they began to outsell Ford 2-1. So Edsel got through to his father and said, Dad, we are getting outsold. Can we stop with this Model T? It's now obsolete. It's a 20 horsepower car. And voila, the Ford Model A. Why is A come after T in this alphabet? Well, there actually was a Ford Model A in 1903, but the Model A that we talk about is because Ford was proclaiming their rebirth. And this is a 40 horsepower car, so they've doubled in horsepower. It is offered in 4 different colors and 7 different body styles, including a station wagon. And they sold 15 million Model Ts and 3.5 million Model As between 1927 and 31. And that is why when we get to hot rods in the vault, you're gonna see many of the hot rods, if not the vast majority of them, are derived out of Ford Model A and Model T bodies because there were so many aftermarket parts available. Let's go to the next section. Now we enter the pre-war section. We're gonna see a lot of Art Deco style cars in this section. And from an automotive perspective, the 20s were an era when we kind of knew how cars worked at this point. The engineering was more stable and reliable. You didn't think like in the early days of the Ford Model T when the gas tank was underneath the engine and you went up a hill and the half a tank of gas, the gas fell to the back of the tank and you ran out of gas. You had to back your way up the hill just so the gas got to the engine. Now, these things are working. But there are still a lot of car makers which are giving it a shot. One is the 1929 DuPont. Now, I don't have to tell you, 1929 was a fantastic year for anyone to begin a financial venture. And you probably had no hiccups along the way, like, say, a Great Depression. But anyways, DuPont didn't have to worry because they had all the money. They were the chemical maker. That's the DuPont we're talking about. And so they had actually entered 4 cars about a decade earlier into Le Mans. 2 didn't start and the other 2 didn't finish. But then they said, we're gonna make a road car. And this road car, which is one of 273, was offered with not 1 body style, not 2, 12 different body styles. What company begins by offering you 12 options? But it didn't matter. This was a $5,300 car. That was the price of 2 houses back then. You can't even get a bathroom added on for that price nowadays. But basically, you could get the body there, and then you would accessorize your car as you wanted, as if you would go on Amazon today to accessorize your living room and type in lamps, and all these lamp options come up. Well, you could get any sort of light that you wanted, and the wood light headlights were the most elegant and probably the least practical. And then you had, I'm going to show you, René Lalique's creation right here. This is true Lalique crystal, and you could get it in a mermaid, you could get it in a horse. This is, of course, the iconic eagle. And René figured out you could put a metal ring around it and throw a light in there for about 20 extra bucks. You know, what do you got? Christmas time, reds and greens. But this car is a boat tail of the 12 different body styles. It's a boat tail. They only sold 273. It's a Model G Speedster, and it goes 100 miles an hour. I like to say safety features included trying not to hit anything back then. You know, and they borrowed the engine. It's the same engine used in one of our cars down there we'll get to in a moment, the Ruxton. And the difference there I'll explain in a moment. Ruxton switched the engines. Packards were the American Rolls Royces. Now, when you could get any radiator mascots there, Packards had about 30 different copyrights on 30 different radiator mascots. That's what we call hood ornaments today. And this one, Nike, the goddess of victory, or I call her woman with wheel. This is a 1929 745 Victoria. It harkens back to the old Victorian carriage days of England by the covered back seat and mustard coloring done by Dietrich. So you could get the body You can get the chassis in at the company and Packard in Indianapolis, and then you can have it shipped anywhere. Dietrich was a Hollywood coach builder, and that added, of course, more to the price, but people weren't worried about price back then. You have a Pierce Arrow. This is very iconic because you can recognize it by the actual Archer. Arrow was actually the second model from George Pierce, which is a Buffalo car maker, and then he decided to call all the others Pierce Arrows after that. They were bought by Studebaker by 1931, and they were out of business by World War II. Another luxury brand that was around Cadillac and whatnot, LaSalle, which we have a couple LaSalles there. Another Lalique Crystal, of course. This does not dictate the brand. A lot of people assume that since it's the same Radiator mascot, it's the same brand. You have to look elsewhere for the brand. There it is. It's a 1930 Cord, the L29 Phaeton, which means windowless. Here's that Ruxton I was talking about. They flipped the engine, that same engine that DuPont used, and they made it a front-wheel drive car. In 1929, this was, whereas the Cord was the first mass-produced front-wheel drive car, this was done beforehand. But the funny story about Ruxton, it's named after an investor that did not invest in the company. A guy named Andrews went to him and said, I got a car company, you want in? And Ruxton goes, nope, I'm good. Well, 1929, he was probably better off, but Ruxton's a good name. They didn't even have their own factory. They had to borrow factories in Hartford, Wisconsin, and St. Louis, Missouri. Now, I had a bruise the other day, and it was a doozy. Oh, so you know it's a big bruise, right? This is a doozy. This is where that comes from. This is a 1933 Duesenberg. This is the SJ model, so it's supercharged. 400 horsepower. 1933, this is 150 miles an hour. You get in an accident, the car might be a little dinged up. The wall will probably have some cracks in it. You will be 16 miles in the future. My favorite phrase that went along with Duesenberg is the only time you could pass a Duesenberg was with the driver's permission. This was actually shipped out to also to the area here. In Pasadena, the Walter M. Murphy Company did the coach build. These were cars that really defined the era. The Lincoln Zephyr, the Cadillac, and of course, the LaSalle, which was one level under the Cadillac in the General Motors line. Now, this is a 1928 LaSalle, and this is a 1934 LaSalle. You notice how the design really upped its game. It went from, something that was reliable and solid and pretty to Art Deco style with the biplane bumper, the narrow grille, and the round hood vents. These two cars designed by Harley Earl, and this was his first design. He was, a kid by all intents and purposes at the time. He's the first executive to come from a design background. And where did he become an executive? Well, with General Motors in their design factory. He headed up their design studios in the 50s and oversaw cars that we're going to see a lot of in a little bit, the Bel Air, the Corvair, and the Corvette. So we have two Rolls Royces behind us which look remarkably different. However, I'm going to warn you, essentially the same car. It's the same model at least. It's a Rolls-Royce Phantom 1. You've got a 1925 there and a 1927 here. I'm going to talk about this one for a brief moment. This, if you'll notice the nameplate, its initials FA. The gentleman who purchased this in Gotham Square in London loved this car so much. Whenever he went back to New York City and Los Angeles, he would have it shipped ahead because he loved appearing on the society pages. You'll notice green silk brocade upholstery in the back. They're actually footrests as well. Silver bud vases. There's a speaking tube so he can communicate with the driver. You'll notice this is what's called a touring car. The cab is covered and the driver's section is not. That harkens back only a few years earlier to the horse and carriage days. So he could communicate with the driver and find out if it was still raining or not. That gentleman, you know him as a hoofer, an actor, a singer. That's Fred Astaire. And this was his car for many, many years. Now, how is this car the same? It began as a Phantom 1 and still is really with a Hooper build, just like that one. And really that ends right here because although it was originally commissioned by Anna Thompson Dodge, who was Horace Dodge's wife, and when he passed, she had a lot of money, so she commissioned it and then didn't pick it up, and it bounced around, and an owner in 1934 that had it decided he wanted to enter it in the Concours d'Elegance, and it couldn't look like all the others. It had to look special. So he brought it to a Belgian coach builder by the name of Hagerty. And Hagerty, primarily later in their run, they were known for doing buses. And so they built this entire body on top of, or amended, the Phantom One by Hooper. And the grille is actually right there, and it's extended. This is about 21 feet, about 7,000 pounds. Goes, 0 to 60 in, whenever it's ready. But it's got the radiator shell that's sloping, skirted wheel. It has the famous round door. It has a tail fin on the back and twin sunroofs. So if the passenger wants the sun but the driver does not, they can have that. I call it early climate control. So now I bring you into what we have just opened, the Icons Gallery. And this is for some of our most prized possessions, including what we've recently received from Peter Mullen and the Peter Mullen Automotive Museum. We're grateful for their contributions. This is a 1938 Hispano Suiza, which, if you want to get in detail on this, you gotta look at the video by Leslie Kendall, our chief historian here at the museum. It's as in-depth as you'll ever get. I love this car, the 39 Delahaye 165. This is one of two. It was featured in the World's Fair that year, and it's a Fagoni at Fallaci design. They have these hallmarks of design, and that includes skirted wheels on the front. Not so practical, but not great for turning radius. You'll notice how narrow the tires are, but it does turn. But remember, back then, people this wealthy, you've got homes with round driveways, so you don't have to worry about turning much. Encased headlights are part of it. The top goes into the metal, and the windshield, there's a crank, and it goes in and out of the console. Now we go to Italy. The Cistitalia, generally regarded 1947 as the first sports car. You're not just throwing on your sweatpants, not that they had sweatpants back then, and showing up in your car. You're dressing the part. This is bespoke couture, so you have to look the part and feel the part. And of course, this is a Pininfarina coach builder. For my money, of all the Italian builders, the Ghia, the Bartone, Vignali, the Scaglietti, Pininfarina would be my number one. In the 1950s, there was a theme prevalent in the American automotive culture, and that was American drivetrain and Italian styling. That's what Americans wanted. They started to see how Europeans were making cars, and so American automakers tried to emulate that. This is actually a Cadillac. It's one of two. It's a 1953 Series 62 Coupe. We have several Series 62 Coupes here. None of them look like this. This has a Ghia body. You'll notice the egg crate grille, split windshield, stylized sides, and it has fitted luggage in the trunk. And there are many other automakers that were trying to make these beautiful cars with the help of Italian coach builders. The problem is you're shipping your business to Italy and then shipping it back. It is a pricey endeavor. We have a couple Rolls Royces. This one is a 1929 Rolls Royce Phantom One. It is one of 2,900 built in which American city? Anyone? That was actually completely built in Springfield, Massachusetts. For a few years, they tried making them there. Now we have a variety of sports cars, including one of our prized possessions here. 1952 Ferrari 212-225 Barchetta. What I've heard is one of 8, but as the story goes, this was Enzo's, and he sold it to the Ford executives who presented it to their boss. And what did Ford want it for? Was Henry Ford II driving real fast and, looking, to see the wind in his hair and feel Italian? No. Ford wanted that Italian-styled look. So the egg crate grille, 3 years later, what car did it end up on? The Ford Thunderbird. Stylized sides about a decade later. They put them on a Ford Falcon and called it a Mustang. Worked out pretty well. That was Ford's way of keeping up with the style and the want of the time. Now, you may have heard of this car, the 1956 Jaguar XKSS. This was Steve McQueen's Jaguar. Steve McQueen bought this car, he loved this car, then he sold this car and he missed the car, so he bought it back. He had it painted this British racing green, it used to be white, and restored. But what's funny, we have those seats there, those were just put in. The original seats, the Steve McQueen seats, were done by Tony Nancy, the great interior guy of the era. And in order to keep the value up, to increase the value, the seats were kept looking weathered because Steve McQueen sat there. So we have kind of hermetically sealed those seats and just replaced them with these, so we could always bring the old seats back if need be. Also, it has a Von Dutch glove box that was put in custom so that he could keep his sunglasses in. But this car, as the rumor always goes, he would work on his cars late at night, annoying the neighbors, but he would go on Mulholland Drive or wherever he would race, and he'd tell cops, listen, if you catch me, I'll buy you a steak dinner. But this is one of 16. That's another thing that makes it very rare because the Jaguar factory burned down and they didn't have computer backup at the time. So they lost the blueprints. We have Lamborghinis. We have, from one of the designers of Lamborghini, we have this Chisetta Mortader. This is one of one. The prototype, that is. There were 11 built later, but it is a V16T engine under the hood, but it does look like Lamborghini in many respects. Many people come here and they assume it is a Lamborghini without reading the badge. Hypercars, fast cars, supercars. We have, in the early 90s, the EB110 competing against the Jaguar XJ220. Jaguar, they use the number to kind of highlight the fastest performance speed. Now that is misleading, as it only went a very meek 213 miles an hour. And the EB110 was named such because it was to be in 1991, the year those came out, with the naming rights purchased by Romano Artioli, a dealer in Rome, and he wanted to celebrate Ettore Bugatti's 110th birthday, what would have been his 110th birthday. And that's about one of 138 or so. That's a popular car here at the museum that we take out for events and cruise-ins and whatnot. The row of Fords. Well, you see, it begins with the 1967 Ford GT40. Now that is Mark III. So they won Le Mans in 66 with Mark I, they won again in 67 with Mark II, and Mark III was the street version. And they made 7 of those, 4 with left-hand drive, 3 with right-hand drive. It is 165 miles an hour, the fastest performance car on the road at the time. I mean, Ferrari, their 275 GTB4 might dispute that, but they were both top of the line in terms of speed. And how did they make that a street version? Well, it's simply round headlights instead of oblong, comfier seats, and more trunk space. There's a GT Heritage version of that, which is in the Gulf-colored livery. And that is, the 2006 there is one that is in that beautiful gray. You'll notice in the headlights, there's a little Easter egg. It says 100. And that would have been, when they started the design of this in around 02, 03, that would have been Ford's 100th birthday. So, and then there's the second generation of the Ford GT. And it's not called the GT40 because they had lost the naming rights, and the company that held them they asked for too much money. Ford said, no, we're good. Here's a hypercar you won't see everywhere. This is a 2020 Laraki Sahara. You see the Moroccan color scheme here. And I like to call it a Chevy hypercar because it has the turbocharged Chevy V8 engine in it, but it is one of 2, and it is owned by the King of Morocco. So the most requested cars that we have, or the brand that we are requested most, would be Lamborghini. And we are lucky to have, you saw the Miura over there, we're lucky to have the Lamborghini Countach over here. Now my cameraman, great Tiziano, Italian, would tell you that I think he'd confirm that the phrase Countach in northern Italy was like a phrase to exclaim shock, wonder, and awe. And that's where the name comes from. Now, I am in awe of this the LM002. They made, 300 plus of these, and it stands for Lamborghini Militare. It is basically a pre-Hummer Hummer. It was originally to be a design worked on with the armed services here, the armed forces, and then Lamborghini took it and went off with it. It goes from 0 to 60 in 7.7 seconds, even with these huge 365 Pirelli tires, I think, is that the number? Don't quote me on that number, but they are huge. It'll stop though, from 70 to 0 in about 200 some odd feet. So that's pretty good. And it gets a robust 8 miles per gallon. The nickname of this car from 1986, the Rambo Lambo. You can tell why. It's named after that famous movie in the 80s. And also Sylvester Stallone had one and several other celebrities. An interesting car to say the least. We also have a Lamborghini LP400S from 1978, beautiful color. And Ferraris. Of these Ferraris, I'd say the Ferrari Enzo is our most iconic. 400 of these were built to 2004, 218 miles an hour, and we have a lot of designers, a lot of connections to the Art Center College of Design, which is right here in Pasadena, California. Ken Okayama is the designer of this, and he took basically an F1 monocoque chassis and he expanded to make into a street car. It has the Kevlar and the carbon fiber interior, and it's just a car that many people have come and they couldn't believe they're seeing one in person, so we're lucky to have one here. Well, we've come to the end of the Icons Gallery, so that's the end of part 1. Check this channel for part 2 and part 3, where we'll feature more unique and rare cars. Design elements come into play, and we're going to see cars used for a variety of purposes. Stay with us.